Hey folks, it's a beautiful evening in Los Osos and I'm up here in the apricot tree. And I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to talk about a really important distinction that we need to be very careful with when we talk about logical positivism or even any other later views in philosophy of science that we're going to come to later this quarter. And the distinction is the difference between talking about language as opposed to talking about the world. So let me just use a slightly silly example here, and I'm going to use the word apricot. And I can say things about the word apricot that are true of that term. So a term is a small piece of language. It's not a complete statement, it's just a word or words that typically, under normal circumstances in our everyday life, we take to refer to or designate ordinary objects. So I can say, for example, of the word apricot that it has 7 letters, or that it begins with the letter A, or that the last letter is T, but it would make no sense at all to say that an apricot itself begins with the letter A. So instead, the relationship between language and world that we're assuming here with logical positivism is a very simple one, and it is that the word, if it's an observation term, this word here refers to this thing here in the world, which, believe it or not, is an apricot. It's just not very ripe. So I can say of this apricot itself that it's partly green and partly red, but it makes no sense to say that the word apricot is partly green and partly red. Not the way I've written it on the board. I can say that this apricot grew on the tree, but I would never say that of the word apricot. So you see, there's this very basic distinction between language and world, and to understand logical positivism, we really have to understand that very clearly, because apricot would be an example of an observation term. It's an observation term because it denotes an ordinary mid-sized thing and its properties, okay? So the logical positives are perfectly happy to say that observation terms denote things in the world, and there's no issue there about whether or not the apricot is really real. They're not interested in that kind of metaphysical question. But things are very different when it comes to theoretical terms. So let's think of a kind of quintessential example of a theoretical term. Let's take the term electron. And again, the term electron is just a word in a scientific theory. According to logical positivism, the term electron does not designate a physical thing in the world. So they are not claiming that electrons really exist and that the term electron refers to them. That's not how they see the relationship between theoretical terms and the world. In fact, when it comes to theoretical terms, right, so if now the kind of language we're thinking about is theoretical terms, whatever they mean is established by a correspondence rule that connects that word electron to more language, right, which includes a whole bunch of observation terms. So this is where logical positivists might say that we have a correspondence rule that says something like there are electrons in the cloud chamber if and only if we see tracks on the photographic plate that have a particular kind of shape. So what goes on this side is a bunch of words that are observation terms. Okay? So these are going to be observation terms. And it's these observation terms that finally refer to the world. Okay, but what they refer to is not electrons, right? What they refer to is a cloud chamber that, you know, we can create photographic images with if we have it all set up properly. So theoretical terms get their meaning entirely from this correspondence with observation terms, and the observation terms are what refer to the world. So there's a couple of attitudes that you might see in logical positivism when it comes to asking, well, wait a minute, what about the word electron? Are there things in the world over here that this term refers to? And there's basically 2 answers to that. One answer is no. We should not say that electrons really genuinely exist, because all that the term electron means is exhaustively given through the correspondence rule by linking what that word means to observation terms. Okay? The second option is that you could say something slightly softer philosophically. You could say, well, maybe there's electrons, maybe there isn't. We don't really know, and we don't really care, because by establishing this tight connection between the theoretical terms and the observation terms, we can make all the predictions we want about the observable stuff. So I hope this will help you keep straight how to write really clearly about the difference between observation terms and theoretical terms, and how to avoid what philosophers call category mistakes. Have a great evening.